Buddha's last days, the shocking mystery and profound wisdom of his final moments. How would you face death? What if you knew, without a doubt, the exact moment of your death? How would you react? Would you embrace it with calm acceptance, or would the weight of that knowledge bring fear and uncertainty? For one of history's greatest spiritual leaders, this was not just a philosophical thought. It was a reality he had to face head-on. In 483 BC, at the age of 80, Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha, embarked on a journey that would become the final chapter of his earthly existence. His body, fragile from old age, was giving way to the inevitable, yet his mind remained as sharp and clear as ever. Buddha knew that his time on this earth was coming to an end, but was his passing merely the result of old age, or was something more deliberate at play? Could there have been forces beyond natural decay influencing his final moments? Today, we dive deep into the untold story of Buddha's last days, an exploration of mystery, wisdom, and perhaps even betrayal. What happened during his final moments? Was he poisoned, or was this simply the natural course of life? What teachings did he leave behind for us? And why does his death continue to captivate us, even after more than 2,500 years? Join me as we unravel the mystery of Buddha's last days, his parting wisdom, and the legacy he left behind. This journey into his final moments is not just a historical account, it's a reflection on how we, too, can live our lives with the same clarity and acceptance of death that Buddha demonstrated. Could we learn to face our own mortality with the same grace and mindfulness he did? Buddha's final journey, the pilgrimage of impermanence. Buddha's final journey began in the ancient city of Rajagaha. At the age of 80, his body was frail, ravaged by the toll of time, but his mind remained as sharp as ever, a testament to the years of meditation and mindfulness that had shaped his life. Though his health was declining, Buddha insisted on traveling to Kushinagar, a town over 200 miles away. It was a grueling journey, yet Buddha was resolute. But why embark on such a physically demanding pilgrimage at this stage of his life? Was he simply fulfilling the natural course of old age? Or was this an intentional act, a journey not just of physical movement, but one filled with profound meaning? As Buddha and his devoted disciple, Ananda, set out, whispers began to circulate among his followers. Why this path? Some believed that Buddha was fully aware that this would be his last journey, that the trek was his way of saying goodbye. Others saw it as a final, living demonstration of the teachings he had shared for decades. Impermanence, detachment, and acceptance. Along the way, Buddha stopped in villages and towns, offering his wisdom to all who encountered him. His teachings about the inevitability of change, the importance of compassion, and the path to liberation rang out through the land, even as his body grew weaker with each step. With each passing day, Buddha's health continued to deteriorate, yet he pressed on, his determination a silent lesson to his followers. The pilgrimage was no longer just a journey from one place to another. It became a lesson in resilience and mindfulness. It was his final demonstration of how to face life's most difficult challenge, death itself, with grace, awareness, and an unwavering commitment to his teachings. Buddha wasn't just walking toward Kushinagar, he was walking toward the ultimate realization of his teachings, that life is fleeting and the only constant is change. Buddha's awareness of his death, the teachings of impermanence. As Buddha's final journey unfolded, an important question arose among his disciples. Did he know that his death was near? The evidence suggests that not only did Buddha know, but he embraced it with the clarity of mind that only a fully enlightened being could possess. In the Parinirvana Sutta, a key Buddhist text chronicling Buddha's last days, he speaks directly to Ananda, his most devoted disciple. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will pass into final nirvana. This proclamation, made with the calm certainty of a man who had long prepared for this moment, was a startling reminder that Buddha's wisdom wasn't bound by the physical realm. His insight extended far beyond the present moment. But what does it mean for someone to know that their death is imminent? Most of us spend our lives avoiding the thought of our own mortality, pushing it to the back of our minds. But Buddha, in his profound wisdom, chose to face it directly, teaching us how to prepare for this inevitable truth with equanimity. His decision to decline the opportunity to extend his life was not one of despair but an intentional act of relinquishment. He let go of the desire to live, fully embodying the Buddhist principle of non-attachment. This awareness wasn't limited to mere prediction. Buddha meticulously planned his final days, selecting where to teach, who to meet, and how to leave his physical form behind. He even arranged the details of his own funeral, showing that death, while inevitable, can be approached with intentionality, wisdom, and grace. His ability to face death without fear, even as it loomed closer with each passing day, was perhaps one of his greatest teachings, an example of how a lifetime spent practicing mindfulness can prepare the mind to accept impermanence. Buddha's awareness and acceptance of his own death raised profound questions. Was this an example of superhuman foresight? Or was it the simple clarity of a man who had spent his life preparing for this moment of transition? For Buddha, the knowledge of death didn't breed fear. It became an opportunity to impart one final, powerful lesson to his followers, that all things must pass, and that true liberation comes not in holding on, but in letting go. The last meal, the mystery of poisoning, a lesson in acceptance. As Buddha's final journey continued, he arrived at the small village of Pava, where a humble blacksmith named Kunda invited him to his home for a meal. This seemingly simple act of generosity would later become one of the most debated moments in Buddhist history. Kunda prepared a special dish for Buddha, known as Sukhara Madhava. The exact nature of the dish has been a point of contention for centuries. Some texts suggest it was a tender pork dish, while others describe it as a mushroom delicacy. Regardless of its ingredients, Buddha accepted the offering with gratitude, embodying the teachings of non-attachment by receiving whatever was offered to him without judgment. Yet, shortly after consuming the meal, Buddha began to suffer from severe pain and dysentery. His body, already weakened by age and the grueling journey, reacted poorly to the food. Despite his suffering, Buddha's thoughts were not consumed with regret or bitterness. Instead, his compassion turned toward Kunda, the man who had so kindly offered him the meal. In a display of extraordinary grace, Buddha instructed Ananda to reassure Kunda, telling him that offering food to a Buddha is an act of great merit, and it should never be regretted. This reaction from Buddha was a profound demonstration of his teachings on accepting life as it comes, without complaint or attachment, even in the face of discomfort or suffering. The nature of Buddha's last meal has been the subject of much debate, with some suggesting that it may have been poisoned, either accidentally or intentionally. Over the centuries, this theory gained traction, with some speculating that someone might have sought to end Buddha's life prematurely, either out of jealousy or with a misguided sense of spiritual service. However, most modern scholars reject the poisoning theory, pointing out that Buddha's symptoms, severe abdominal pain and diarrhea, align with the natural consequences of old age, poor health, and the physical strain of his journey. Buddha himself, in his final moments, seemed to dismiss any notion of foul play, praising Kunda's offering as being as significant as the food he had eaten on the night of his enlightenment. This statement suggests that Buddha saw his final meal not as the cause of his death, but as a significant spiritual event in itself. The meal, whether tainted or not, became a living teaching on impermanence, showing that even in the face of physical discomfort, one could maintain a mind free from attachment, regret, or anger. The controversy surrounding Buddha's last meal ultimately serves as a reminder of the complex relationship between history, legend, and spiritual teachings. Regardless of whether or not it was poisoned, the meal symbolizes Buddha's teachings on acceptance, impermanence, and the illusory nature of the physical world. In his final moments, Buddha demonstrated to his followers how to face suffering with calm, mindfulness, and compassion. A lesson that would resonate through the ages. Buddha's final resting place, a symbol of life cycles. As Buddha's final journey neared its end, he and his disciples arrived in the small town of Kushinagar, nestled in the foothills of the Himalayas. This unassuming village would soon become one of Buddhism's most sacred sites. Upon entering the town, Buddha directed Ananda to prepare a resting place between two sala trees, a deliberate choice that held deep symbolic meaning. Buddha had been born under a sala tree, and now, in the final moments of his life, he would pass away under the same type of tree, completing the full circle of his earthly existence. Despite his failing body, Buddha's mind remained clear. Even in his final hours, he used every opportunity to impart profound teachings to those around him. As he lay down on his right side, facing north, Buddha spoke once more of the nature of existence. All compounded things are subject to decay, he said, reminding his followers of the impermanence that governs all things, even the body of an enlightened being. This simple statement encapsulated the essence of Buddha's entire philosophy, that everything in the physical world is transient and that liberation comes through understanding and accepting this truth. The setting around him seemed to acknowledge the gravity of the moment. As Buddha reclined, the sala trees, almost as if sensing the significance of the event, burst into bloom. Unseasonal flowers showering the ground around him. The petals, delicate and pure, seemed to echo the beauty of Buddha's life, which had blossomed in the midst of suffering and now, in his final moments, was ready to return to the earth. The vivid hues of the setting sun filled the sky, adding to the profound serenity that enveloped Buddha as he entered his final meditation. This act of lying between the two sala trees was not just the end of Buddha's physical journey. It was a powerful visual representation of the Buddhist concept of samsara, the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. By choosing this specific resting place, Buddha demonstrated the very teachings he had lived by, showing his followers that even death itself is part of the natural flow of life. His final act was one of profound mindfulness, symbolizing the beauty and inevitability of impermanence, and offering his disciples a final lesson on the importance of living in harmony with the cycles of life. Buddha's last teachings and Ananda, a final lesson in letting go. As the sun set over Kushinagar, Buddha's disciples gathered around him. Despite his failing health, Buddha remained fully present, imparting his final teachings with unwavering clarity. Among those gathered was Ananda, his closest and most devoted disciple, who had been by Buddha's side through countless moments of wisdom and guidance. But now, as the reality of Buddha's impending death loomed over him, Ananda's heart was heavy with sorrow. His eyes, filled with unshed tears, betrayed the depth of his grief. How could he possibly accept the loss of his teacher, his guide, his friend, the one who had shown him the path to liberation. Sensing the turmoil within Ananda, Buddha turned to him with a voice filled with compassion and wisdom. "You have done much good, Ananda," he said softly. "Do not let sorrow cloud your mind. The time for your own awakening is near." In these simple words, Buddha offered Ananda a profound lesson not just about detachment, but about the nature of love and loss. Even in his final moments, Buddha demonstrated the importance of letting go not just of material attachments, but of even the most cherished emotional bonds. For all things, including life itself, are impermanent. Buddha's teachings on non-attachment were not just philosophical, that they were deeply practical. In his last moments, he showed his followers that true freedom comes not through clinging to people, possessions, or even ideas, but through understanding the fleeting nature of all things. Ananda's sorrow was understandable. He had been with Buddha for decades, learning from him, witnessing the depth of his teachings. But Buddha's words offered a balm for that sorrow, a gentle reminder that even love must eventually be released, as it is just another form of attachment. Turning to his community of monks, Buddha addressed them one final time. He urged them to ask any lingering questions about the Dharma, the teachings, or the community. If you have any doubt or uncertainty concerning the Buddha, the Dharma, or the Sangha, he said, ask now, so that you do not later regret that you missed the opportunity. The room fell silent, as no one had any further questions. Buddha's teachings had been so clear, so profound, that his followers knew there was nothing more to ask. His wisdom had already permeated their hearts, and they had learned to trust in his words without needing any further explanation. Buddha then delivered what would become known as the Four Great References. These were guidelines that would ensure his teachings remained pure and intact, even after his physical death. He urged the monks to always compare any future claims of his teachings with the recorded words of the suttas and the monastic code. This was his final act of preservation, a way to safeguard the purity of the Dharma for generations to come. The Four Great References, preserving the Dharma for future generations. Buddha's final teachings were not just about preparing his disciples for his imminent death, but they were also about ensuring that his message would endure long after he had passed into nirvana. One of the most significant aspects of his final discourse was the delivery of what became known as the Four Great References. These were essential guidelines for maintaining the purity of his teachings, ensuring that his wisdom would be preserved in its true form for future generations. In his last words, Buddha instructed his monks to always refer to the recorded teachings of the suttas and the Venerable Ones. He urged them to compare any new interpretation or claim of his words with these sacred texts, as they were the only reliable source of his true teachings. Do not let your own opinions cloud the truth of the Dharma, he advised. When in doubt, turn to the scriptures and the monastic code. Let these be the measure by which you judge all things. This emphasis on preserving the integrity of the Dharma highlights the importance of upholding the teachings of an enlightened master. Buddha understood that the world would continue to change, and that over time, his words could be misinterpreted or distorted. By establishing these guidelines, he ensured that the core principles of Buddhism, compassion, mindfulness, and the path to liberation, would remain untainted by human error or ego. But Buddha's message wasn't just for his monks, it was for all of us, even today. In our own lives, we are often faced with conflicting ideas, beliefs, and interpretations of what is true. Buddha's final instructions remind us that in times of doubt, we must always seek clarity in the teachings themselves. It is easy to be swayed by popular opinion or the noise of the world, but the essence of the Dharma lies in the timeless wisdom of Buddha's words. His final act was not only a gift to his disciples, but to all those who would seek the truth for centuries to come. The four great references also represent a deeper truth about the impermanence of all things. Buddha knew that even his own teachings, over time, might be subject to change. Yet, he trusted that by preserving the original teachings through careful study, mindfulness, and discernment, the Dharma would continue to guide practitioners on the path to enlightenment. In this final moment, Buddha demonstrated the very principles he had lived by: non-attachment, clarity, and unwavering commitment to the truth. Buddha's final hours, teaching in the face of mortality. As the evening sky darkened over Kushinagar, the hour of Buddha's passing grew ever nearer. His disciples, many of whom had spent their lives in his service, sat by his side, fully aware that the moment they had been dreading had finally arrived. Yet even in the face of his own mortality, Buddha's mind remained sharp, his presence unwavering. Despite the exhaustion and intense pain his body endured, he continued to impart his wisdom, showing that true spiritual practice doesn't end with the body, it transcends it. In his final hours, Buddha's teachings became even more profound. His compassion for his disciples remained as strong as ever, and his desire to guide them toward liberation did not falter, even as his body became frail and weak. Buddha's final lesson, in a way, was the greatest lesson of all, that even in the face of death, one can remain present, awake, and mindful. His death was not a moment to be feared or mourned, but an opportunity for his disciples to witness firsthand the ultimate teaching on impermanence and the nature of reality. Among the many who had gathered was Subhata, a wandering ascetic who had only recently encountered Buddha. He had not spent years by Buddha's side as Ananda had, but he too was seeking the truth. When Subhata expressed his desire to speak with Buddha, Ananda, ever protective of his teacher, hesitated. Buddha, however, overruled Ananda's objections, encouraging him to let Subhata come. "Let him come," Buddha said. "He seeks the truth." Even in his final moments, Buddha was still guiding those who were ready to hear his teachings, showing that the path to enlightenment is open to all, no matter when they arrive. Subhata's meeting with Buddha was transformative. In their brief conversation, Buddha imparted the essence of the Dharma, and Subhata became the last person to receive direct teachings from the enlightened master. Hours later, as the night deepened and Buddha's breaths grew increasingly shallow, Subhata attained enlightenment. This final conversion emphasized Buddha's unwavering dedication to helping others reach liberation, even as his own life was drawing to a close. Buddha's final hours were a living testament to the teachings he had shared throughout his life. As his disciples sat in silence, watching their teacher move through deep meditative states, it was clear that Buddha's death was not the end. It was a transition, a release into the ultimate freedom of Parinirvana, the state beyond birth and death. As Buddha entered his final meditation, he embodied the very principles of mindfulness and equanimity that he had taught his followers for decades. He moved through the jhanas, the deep meditative states he had mastered long ago, showing that even in the face of death, one could remain grounded, serene, and fully present. Parinirvana, the final liberation, Buddha's last breath. As midnight approached, the moment Buddha had so long anticipated was at hand. His breathing grew shallower, his body frailier, yet his mind remained as clear as ever. The air around him seemed to hum with the presence of something beyond the ordinary, something timeless, as if the entire universe was holding its breath in anticipation of the moment when Buddha would finally cross into Parinirvana. Buddha's disciples, standing vigil beside him, felt the weight of the impending loss. They had spent years learning from the enlightened master, absorbing his teachings, witnessing the depth of his wisdom. And yet, despite all their understanding of impermanence and the nature of life and death, the reality of losing their teacher was still a shock. For Ananda, especially, the sorrow was overwhelming. His heart ached at the thought of losing the person who had guided him, who had taught him the path to liberation. Buddha, ever attuned to the emotions of those around him, turned his gaze to Ananda. "Do not mourn me," he said, his voice filled with compassion. "Everything that arises must pass away. Even this body is subject to decay. What I have taught you is the truth. Cling not to this, Ananda." These words were a final lesson in letting go, in accepting the inevitable and finding peace in the face of loss. Buddha's death, in a sense, became another teaching, a living example of the impermanence he had spoken about throughout his life. As Buddha entered his final meditation, his disciples watched in reverent silence. His body, though frail and lifeless, seemed to radiate a quiet, serene energy, as though his spirit was already beginning to transcend the physical world. The earth trembled lightly, and a soft light enveloped the Sala grove where Buddha lay. It was as if the universe itself was acknowledging the passing of one of its greatest beings. And then, with a final exhale, Buddha entered Parinirvana, at the ultimate state of liberation, beyond birth, death, and the cycle of samsara. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The gathered monks, who had witnessed countless teachings and demonstrations of wisdom, were left in stunned silence. Ananda, who had been so deeply affected by the loss, spoke the words that would mark the passing of Buddha. "The Master has attained nirvana." The passing of the Buddha was not just the death of a great teacher, it was the completion of a journey that would reverberate throughout the ages. The impact of Buddha's death, a legacy that transcends time. As the news of Buddha's passing spread throughout Kushinagar, the reactions of his disciples were as varied as human emotions themselves. The younger monks, still learning to fully grasp the impermanence of all things, wept openly, their cries of sorrow filling the air. "Too soon has the Blessed One passed away," they lamented, their grief raw and uncontained. Yet, in contrast, the elder monks, those who had absorbed Buddha's teachings more deeply, remained composed. They had come to understand, through years of practice, that death is not to be feared, but to be accepted as a natural part of life's cycle. Ananda, despite his deep sorrow, reminded the gathering of the teachings Buddha had so often imparted, that everything, even the most precious of things, is subject to change. "Do not sorrow, do not lament," Ananda said, echoing Buddha's own words. "Has not the Blessed One already told us that all things that are pleasant and delightful are changeable, subject to separation and becoming other?" In the days that followed, the Mala clan, the local rulers of Kushinagar, arrived to pay their respects. They brought with them flowers, incense, and musical instruments, honoring Buddha with celestial songs and offerings. But what struck everyone most profoundly was how the community did not mourn Buddha's death in the traditional sense. Instead of focusing on the loss, they celebrated his life and teachings. This immediate aftermath of Buddha's passing became a living example of his teachings on impermanence, non-attachment, and the transformation of grief into understanding. The funeral rites were not just rituals, they were a powerful, ongoing demonstration of how the Dharma could turn even the darkest moments into opportunities for spiritual growth. Buddha's death marked not an end, but a new beginning. In his passing into Parinirvana, Buddha's legacy was sealed not just in the teachings he had left behind, but in the hearts and minds of those who would carry his message forward. It was during these days of mourning and celebration that the first Buddhist council was convened. The purpose of this gathering was to preserve the Buddha's teachings, his words and his wisdom, ensuring that the Dharma would continue to guide future generations of practitioners even after his physical form was gone. This council laid the foundation for the spread of Buddhism across Asia and eventually the entire world. Buddha's teachings, preserved in sacred texts and passed down through the generations, would transcend his death, continuing to influence and inspire millions of people, both in his time and long after. Legacy and last words: Buddha's eternal influence. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the sky, the full reality of Buddha's passing began to settle in. The disciples, though deeply grieved, had learned to accept the truth that Buddha had so often taught: all things must pass. His final words echoed in their hearts, serving as both a final reminder and a call to action. All conditioned things are subject to decay, he had said. Strive on with diligence. These words were not just his last teachings, they were the very essence of his life's work. The Buddha had spent his entire existence guiding others toward enlightenment, and now, even in his final moments, he was urging them to continue the journey without him. The legacy of Buddha's death was not found in his physical form, but in the wisdom he left behind. His teachings, now recorded and codified through the efforts of his disciples, would become the guiding light for countless generations of practitioners. The Buddha's passing demonstrated the ultimate truth of his teachings, that true immortality lies not in the preservation of the body, but in the continued impact of wisdom shared and lives transformed. The message he left behind was simple yet profound: live mindfully, with compassion, and embrace the impermanence of life. Today, over 2,500 years after his death, Buddha's teachings continue to inspire and influence millions of people around the world. His influence reaches beyond the boundaries of religion, extending into fields such as psychology, neuroscience, and popular culture. The principles of mindfulness, compassion, and impermanence have become universally recognized, offering guidance for those seeking peace and clarity in their own lives. Buddha's death, though marked by sorrow and loss, ultimately became a powerful teaching in itself. His life and passing were a demonstration of how one can face the greatest challenge, death, with grace, wisdom, and equanimity. His last words were a reminder that we must not become attached to the physical world, for it is fleeting. Instead, we must focus on the eternal truth of the Dharma, striving for liberation and understanding in each moment. As we reflect on Buddha's final days, we are left with a question to ponder: what would we do if we knew today was our last? How can we, like Buddha, live fully and mindfully, embracing the impermanence of life with grace and purpose? In Buddha's passing, we find not just a historical event, but a profound teaching for us all. His death was not an end, but a new beginning point, one that continues to resonate with us, inspiring us to live with wisdom and compassion every day. As we come to the end of this journey through Buddha's final days, we are left with a profound sense of the timeless wisdom he imparted to us. His last teachings about impermanence, non-attachment, and the path to liberation continue to resonate with us, even after over 2,500 years. Buddha's death was not the end of his legacy. It was the moment his teachings took on a deeper significance, reminding us that every moment is precious and every breath is an opportunity for awakening. So, how can we apply Buddha's final words in our own lives? The truth of impermanence is all around us, and yet we often live as if we have all the time in the world. But Buddha showed us that true freedom comes from understanding and accepting the fleeting nature of life. It's not about fearing death, but about living each moment with mindfulness and compassion. Now, I challenge you, take a moment to reflect on Buddha's last words. All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. What will you do today, this week, or this year to live more fully, more mindfully, and with purpose? How can you embrace the impermanence of life with grace, just as Buddha did? If this exploration of Buddha's final days has inspired you, I encourage you to reflect deeply on the lessons of his life and death. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How has Buddha's wisdom impacted you? And what steps will you take to incorporate these teachings into your daily life? If you found value in this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Join us on this journey of mindfulness and self-awareness. Let's continue to learn, grow, and embrace the Dharma together. Remember, as Buddha taught us, every ending is also a new beginning. So, let's begin anew, with diligence, awareness, and compassion in every step we take. Until next time, may you find peace in the impermanence of life.